guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I am here to do a book tag today, and this is a book tag that I myself actually created a few years ago for Christmas, and it is called Twas the Night Before Christmas book tag. I will leave a link down to my original video down below, which was a good few years ago, and is when I had my very short hair, so don't be surprised if you click onto that and you're surprised at how different I look. Also much younger and fresher faced. But I really enjoy this tag. I created questions to go with the lines in the Twas the Night Before Christmas poem / story, so I'm going to go straight on into it. So the first line is, "'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." And the question is, a book that kept you up so late that everyone else was asleep. And I have to say, it's been a really long time since I have been reading a book up really late. I just don't know what it is with me anymore, but come like 10 o'clock I am so tired. But I will say the last few books I've been really hooked on and I wanted to stay up late to finish, I just didn't want to put them down, were definitely the last few Karen Slaughter books I've read. I think the last book I read was A Faint Cold Fear, and I definitely just was so hooked onto that book I didn't want to put it down, especially at bedtime, because it was so gripping and I just wanted all the answers to the crimes and the mysteries within the book. I just really needed to know the answers before I fell asleep. The second question is, "And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap." And the question for this is a book that sent you to sleep. And this is a book I've talked about a little bit in terms of it making me fall asleep and being really boring. And that was The Luminous Dead by, I think, Caitlin Starling. And this is a book that is a sci-fi book. It's based around a woman who is on this planet and she's basically employed to do this kind of a cave expedition, and once she goes into the caves she realises there's something a little bit ominous living within these caves. There is a mystery behind the person who has sent her into these caves, who is funding the expedition, and her life may well be in a lot of danger being in these caves. And she ends up having this really strong connection to the person who is guiding her through these caves. But the thing is this book should have been really fun, it should have been intense, it should have been gripping for me, but it just wasn't. And I just found the book went around in circles and it kind of repeated itself like that, and it never felt like she was getting anywhere or really getting any answers at some points, and I just found myself really bored by the story. And there was a point in this book where I did actually fall asleep, so this is a brilliant answer to this question. "When out on the roof there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter." And this is a book or a book scene that made your heart race. Two answers for this question, and one of them is Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay, which I read on audiobook a few months ago, and this is based around a rabies virus that ends up mutating and it affects humans as well as animals by a short incubation period, and within a few hours you are stark raving mad and you can go and bite people. The people who are affected are still alive, so they're not zombies, but it can be transmitted through saliva. And we are following a character whose husband gets attacked and she's attacked as well, but she's actually 9 months pregnant at the time of this attack, and she basically is in a race against time to, number one, get the rabies vaccine to try and stop this virus spreading in her body, and then after that it's between her and her friend trying to get her to this particular point before they know if she's 100% safe. They want to try and deliver the baby anyway, but they need to travel while all these crazy things are happening in the world, and there are like quarantines and roadblocks and all sorts of things happening. And because I think I read this on audiobook, it was really intense and it was just a race against time, so everything just felt so heart-racing and so intense, and I just couldn't stop listening to it. And then another answer, as I said, to this question was The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue, which I read just recently, and this is set also around a great flu epidemic, and it is set in 1918, and we are following a character who is on a maternity ward with women who are sick with the flu, and basically she is constantly against a race against time. She's constantly in these really intense situations with these women who are both sick and pregnant and sometimes in labour and sometimes having difficult labours, and she has to do all she can without modern medicine to save these women. And I just loved this book so much, could not put it down. I felt everything was so intense, was so gripped to every single scene, and yeah, I loved this book. "When what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer?" An object in a book that was utterly magical or a magical book. And I'm actually going to go with my current read at the moment. It's The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and I have to say from the first chapter of this book I just knew it was magical and I knew I was going to love it. I'm about 56% through the book at the moment and I'm still loving it, and I love the old magic that is in this book, the old magic of kind of the old gods and the old icons that Russian people used to believe in, kind of a little bit almost like fairies and elves and things like that, and the way they honour these these old creatures, and like they leave gifts and food and stuff out for them to feed them, so they will in turn bless the farm or bless the family or bless the household. And I love that kind of form of old magic, while at the same time there is this kind of sinister magic, kind of maybe old dark god that is kind of coming closer in the book, that I don't know yet what will happen. But the whole book itself and the quality of the writing and the snowy atmosphere, it all just combines to give a really magical reading experience, and I'm really enjoying it. A little old driver, so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. And this question is a twinkle-eyed book character that made you happy. And I'm going to go again with a recent read, and that is Trixie in The Miracle on Ebenezer Street by Catherine Doyle. And Trixie is this little wooden elf who has a penchant for miracles, but also an obsession with sitting on shelves. And she is just so funny and humorous and lively and witty in this book, and she's a little bit sassy as well, which I really enjoy. And she wasn't in the book for too long, only a few chapters, but she definitely makes an impression, and she definitely made me laugh, and I just really loved her. To the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And the question is, a book that made you fly to another land. And I had to think about this one, and I kind of went back to some of the fantasy books I've read this year, because fantasy books in particular will really make me kind of transport myself to this other land, to this completely different world than the one that I'm living in. And one that I really enjoyed this year was The Gutter Prayer by Gareth Hanrahan. And this is a book that is also again a city that is full of different types of gods and different types of creatures. And we are following this one character who seems to be this almost human, seems to be this human connection and a human voice for these really old gods that are actually could be very dangerous. And there are people who want to use this girl for like really bad means, and her life is in danger. We are also following other characters. There's lots like political things going on in the city between kind of the poorer class of people and the richer class of people. We are following this one character who has this disease where he's slowly turning to stone, and before that happens he is basically trying to do what he can to save the people he loves and to look after the people who looked after him when he was younger. And we are following another character who is not quite human and lives in the gutters and like kind of the underground of the city, and he is actually quite wise and knows a lot more than I think he even thinks he knows, and he is going to go through a real transformation in this book as well. And there's just something about this book that really, the whole city came alive for me. I was really there with the characters. I could see what they were doing. I was in the streets with them. When the fighting happened, I felt like I was right there in the middle of the action. And it's a book I really enjoyed, and it's definitely a book that the sequel I really need to read at the start of next year before I start forgetting too much about this book, because it's quite not dense, but it's packed full of information, and I really want to read the next book soon. The next question is, and then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. And this question is a book creature you love, and I've gone for a couple of these. One of them, I've read 2 books this year that are based around dragons. I've read The Last Namsara, and I've also read History of Dragons. I've both really enjoyed those books. I love dragons in books. I love reading about dragons in books. The only thing about The Last Namsara is that there is human connections with dragons, but it just wasn't enough for me, where in A Natural History of Dragons, the dragons are completely wild and can't be tamed at all, and there's something always magnificent about that. I also really enjoyed a cat character in a book called Christmas Island by Natalie Norman that I read recently, and there's a cat in it called Froy who is just the cutest little thing, very smart, and he is a real big character in this book, and I really loved him. The next question is, he was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. And the question is, a character that proves to be more than his or her first impression. And I've got 2 characters for this. 2 characters are actually quite similar, and the first one is Rhysand in A Court of Mist and Fury, who we first meet in A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. And Rhysand, I don't want to say too much about this, but Rhysand comes across kind of vain and arrogant in A Court of Thorns and Roses. At the end, you see something a little bit different in him, and then in A Court of Mist and Fury, he really transforms and you really see who he really is. And there's also a character in a book called Mageborn by Jessica Thorne, which I read at the start of this year, and I do have a video review on this book. There's a character called Bastian who is kind of a prince in this book, and he is actually very similar. I've compared him to Rhysand, and he's very similar in that he's tall, dark, he has kind of dark things associated with him, and people are a little bit scared of him. There's all these rumors about him, and you have a particular impression of him when you first meet him, when the characters first meet him, but then throughout the book you start to get to know him a lot more, and you realize that he's actually a really good person, and there's just all these different things in his life that mean that he has this reputation of being terrible. The next question is, a wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. And this is a book that makes you feel safe or a comfort read. And for me this year, I definitely found that my comfort reads are Regency romances. I've only started reading them this year, and I did have a little bit of a snobby kind of attitude towards them before this. I didn't think they were going to be for me, but then I picked up my first one and I realised that they are absolutely darling. They are so much fun, they are so witty and like fun to read, and such an escape that I just couldn't help myself but to get loads more. And the most recent one that I did read was When Beauty Tamed the Beast by Eloise. James. This is the second book in her fairy tale series, and this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I just love this book. I love all of the books that I've read so far that are Regency romances. I kind of know going into them they're going to be just really fun escapes for me, and that there's going to be something really bad in the book for me not to like it. I've just really enjoyed discovering Regency romances this year, and also just using them as comfort reads and escapes when I really need them. The second last question is, he spoke not a word but went straight to his work and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk. And this is a book that put you to work, or a book that you felt you really needed to concentrate on. And there's been a couple of books this year that I feel have really challenged me in a way, but challenged me in good ways. And the two books I want to talk about are Don't Touch My Hair by Emma DeBerry and Hood Feminism. And both of these books are obviously books around racism and a little bit about anti-racism, but also just kind of teaching me what it's like to be a woman of colour, and something that I will never be able to really understand, but it's something that I can try my best to be an ally for, and something that I can educate myself on. It's something I could do, which is to educate myself about these issues and just to know more and to go and to arm myself with as much knowledge as I can. And I love both these books, particularly Don't Touch My Hair, which I have not stopped talking about since I read it. I just feel like I just feel like I learned so much when I read this book, and I just love it so much. I love Emma DeBerry's writing. I can't wait for her next book, which is called What White People Can Do Next. That's going to be so good. I just know it is. And again, these books put me to work. They challenged me. They made me think about things. They made me think about, you know, maybe the way I was thinking beforehand that was wrong, or maybe racist that I didn't even know I was being. And there are so many more books like this that I can read that will continue to challenge me, that will continue to make me grow, that will continue to educate me. And I'm really looking forward to the next year where I can read more books that will challenge me like this. And then the last question is, Happy Christmas to all, and to all good night. And that is a book with a magnificent ending. For this question, I'm going to go for A Little Hatred by Jo Abercrombie, which I read last year and I absolutely loved. This is a fantasy novel that had the type of ending that was one of these like really amazing moments where I could see it in my head. Like I could always see pictures in my head. I actually was watching a really good video by a Frolic Through Fiction recently, where she was talking about how she can't see pictures in her head, and I just cannot understand that, because when I read a book, it's like I fall into the book and I'm like there in the scene with the characters. I see everything when I read a book. And within this book in particular, it was almost like I was in the room when this last scene happened, and there was this one kind of line in the book that was almost like this amazing like fade to black moment, where like if it was a movie, you'd know that this scene would happen, and then the screen would go black and then the credits would appear, and you would just be left being like, no, I need the next movie, or I need the next book. So, like, that is what I was like. I just needed to pick up the next book right then and there, but I didn't have it, so I couldn't. And it was such a great ending. It was just such a good ending, and I still think about it. And I've had the next book now for the last few months and I still haven't read it, so I really need to prioritize that. But maybe I'll reread A Little Hatred first, because it was just so good. So that is it for this book tag. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I want to wish everyone a really happy holiday season and a really happy new year, and I'll see you guys again next time.